Out of the plains and into the woods, I was now traveling through a dense mosaic of conifers, the trees towering above me, bearing an uncanny resemblance to the sequoias in California. Now I just needed to figure out where my uncle was. That is, if he had even settled here. I didn't stray too far from the stream. If there was any sign of somebody living here, I'd imagine they'd be close to the water. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that everything in this version of Earth felt bigger. The plants, the animals, simply the overall scale of this reality, it was enormous. The hulking trees towered above me like buildings. Emanating from the canopy were the sounds of various birds, many of which sounded nothing like I'd heard before. The forest floor was blanketed in groves of ferns, primeval in appearance. While continuing my way upstream, I regularly kept a sharp eye out for anything man-made. Some of the trees had massive gaping holes in them, not dissimilar to the redwood forests of the Pacific coast in our own timeline. I'd imagine it'd make an ideal place to camp out, although probably not for 20 years. While thinking about it, I came to a complete stop. Now, I don't know what it was at the time, but something didn't sit right. I could feel a presence, not of an animal, no. This felt very different. Something or someone was watching me. Yet no matter where I looked, there was nothing. It's as if the trees themselves had eyes. Perhaps I was just on edge. I brushed it off, albeit reluctantly, and continued about my business. I followed the stream for what seemed like hours, but to no avail. Did I find any sign of human presence? That, unexpectedly, would soon change. Right away I caught a glimpse of something odd on the bark of a tree, the discovery of which piqued my curiosity. I went in for a closer look, and when I did, my eyes widened. Carved into the trunk of this conifer was some sort of image. The image looked like some sort of crest or sigil, circular with 3 points emerging on top. My best guess was that it was a flame. There wasn't a doubt in my mind. This had to have been carved by him. He must have left it for me to find him. Believing I was getting closer, I rushed back to the path down the stream without haste. I knew he had to be close by. Up ahead I could see a clearing. Could this have been it? I emerged from the trees to find a pond, ending at a small waterfall. The remainder of the stream now leading into the mountains. Unfortunately, there was no sign of any settlement. I was so certain, though. He has to be in the vicinity. Who else could have carved that emblem? Exhausted, I decided to stop once more and head down to the water's edge for a drink. I crouched over and scooped up handfuls of water, guzzling it. I wasn't alone, however. Out from the brush, about 5 animals, 1 adult and 4 infants, appeared and treaded down to the edge of the pond on the other side. They were similar to a pig in stature, but possessed a beak similar to a parrot's. Instinctively, I pulled out the notebook and cassette player, number 4 referring me to the creature.
Part of the ceratopsid family, the horned dinosaurs. Chorumius scrofa, the hog bird. It's a small forest-dwelling herbivore. It scours the forest floor, gorging on woody plants, bark, and roots. A shy animal, its name is for its similarities in behaviors to wild pigs.
Seemingly a mother and offspring, they proceeded to the water for a drink, not even seeming to acknowledge my existence. Aside from the hog birds and myself, it didn't seem like there was very much activity at the pond. In fact, things felt a little too quiet. The sounds of the birds that filled the forest earlier had now ceased. It all felt suspicious. Unanticipatedly, the tree adjacent to the hogbird family. It moved. No, that was no tree. With a lightning-fast reaction, a massive bill shot down and grabbed one of the younger animals. The screaming infant struggled, calling out in fear, as a massive giraffe-like animal with the head of a stork shook it violently. The other hogbirds fled, jetting off into the woods. The giant creature lifted its head back and swallowed its catch whole. I swore I could see it go down the gullet. This thing, it was terrifying. Legs like stilts, a long, slender neck, and dark, reddish eyes that gave off a look of insatiable hunger. Then I realized I've seen this animal before. It was the one from the petroglyphs engraved into the rock bluff. Could one of them some time ago have crossed over into our universe? It then strided off into the woods. Lucky for me, it seemed it had its fill. I picked up the notebook, and next to number 7 was a sketch that vaguely resembled the petroglyphs. I skipped ahead on the cassette player to listen.
Mesoropteryx daemonensis, the wood reaper. It's a gargantuan pterosaur the size of a giraffe and the apex predator of the conifer forest. They descended from the Asdarchids of the late Cretaceous, a group that includes the famous Quetzalcoatlus, but have given up flight altogether to become ground-based hunters. Utilizing ambush, their dark brown coloration allows them to blend into the forest, remaining motionless for unsuspecting prey to walk by, and then striking it with their massive bill. Prey is often swallowed whole, much like a stork or heron.
The fact that these things stand motionless, pretending to be trees, made me all the more terrified. To think one of them actually wandered through that portal into our reality. I could only imagine what the people who encountered this thing felt. Not wanting to stick around with that stork monster about, I decided to leave. I still had no lead on the location of my uncle. At this point, I was starting to feel hopeless. But given the carvings on the tree, though, he had to be somewhere in the forest. Was he still even alive? Then another possibility came to me. Higher ground. Perhaps he had decided to set up camp on one of the mountain slopes, away from the dangers below. Come to think of it, the waterfall had been flowing from higher elevations. Anybody living up there would likely have easy access to drinking water. I changed course and headed for the foothills of the mountain. I'd first need to rejuvenate before I did, so I decided to stop and rest yet again. Up ahead, what looked like a barren tree seemed ideal. Without hesitation, I walked over and rested my arm on the trunk. A decision I would come to regret. The tree, within seconds of physical contact, moved. Of course it wasn't a tree. How was I that stupid? I looked up to see the ravenous glare of a wood reaper. The beast let out a deep bellow like some giant demonic goose and thrust its head downward. I barely moved out of the way, as it missed me by several inches. Fast as I could, I made a break for it, plowing through the endless patches of ferns. As I ran, I could hear the reaper giving chase, its freakishly long legs drumming the ground behind me. The damn thing was literally galloping. With rapid thinking, I made some sharp turns, which gave me a little more distance. I kept running, focusing on getting away with my life. To my misfortune, I hit a dead end, a flat wall of rock too vertical to climb. As I turned to face my pursuer, I could see it, creeping around the corner of a tree, gradually closing in on me. Before I knew it, this thing was no more than 3 meters away. The reaper raised its head to strike, but out of nowhere, an object collided with its head, exploding on impact. A swarm of wasps was now marauding the creature, stinging its vulnerable areas. The reaper let out a painful bellow, running off into the forest in agonizing pain. For a moment, things went silent. I just witnessed a wasp's nest get chucked at a giant murder bird. It had to have been thrown by somebody. I looked up in all directions, no sign of anybody around. But as I did, something jumped down from behind me. When I turned around, I was greeted to a small creature, one that resembled a giant owl, but with arms and a tail. It was roughly chest high. The most insane detail, several pieces of jewelry hung around its neck. There was no mistake. Whatever this thing was, it was sapient. The hairy, or more so, feathered creature strutted over to me, not out of malice, but curiosity. It turned its head rapidly several times in a manner just like a bird, analyzing me up close. Unexpectedly, another darted out from behind me, this one instead possessing a harness of some sort that held a pouch against its chest. It too came up to study me. The two of them encircled me, eager to know what this strange skin creature before them was. Afterwards, they congregated in front of me, making a series of chirps, hisses, and grunts to one another, no doubt their language. For about 5 minutes they spoke to each other, until eventually they looked at me, gesturing with their heads. One didn't have to be a linguist to understand that they wanted me to follow them. Neither of them acted truly aggressive toward me. Could my uncle have been living with these creatures? I felt I might stand a better chance of finding him if I came with them. Thus, I fell in line behind my 2 escorts. The 2 birdmen led me around the foothills of the mountain, circling the steep, purportedly unclimbable walls of rock. The more I looked at them, the more intrigued I became. Could dinosaurs really have evolved society in this universe, or even civilization? Naturally, the notebook must have contained the answer to such a question. I opened it on the go, and there at 8 was a sketch reminiscent of my guides. I reached for the cassette player and started the recording.
In a world without humans, non-avian dinosaurs would take up the mantle as a sapient species. This would lead to the development of the orthanoids, descending from a lineage of dinosaurs known as the Thalassauриds, a group of small, fast-moving herbivores known in the fossil record for their burrowing habits. They have now entered a stone age, utilizing both stone and wooden tools for their everyday affairs. Their anatomy has drastically changed. Once possessing a roadrunner-like appearance, they now have a build very similar to a burrowing owl, standing in a semi-upright gait, with arms possessing dexterous wrists. Living high up in the mountain slopes, they venture down into the forest below only to forage for fruits, nuts, and insects. Benign entities, their customs forbid acts of violence, barring life-threatening situations. I myself was able to befriend a tribe established along the slopes of what in our world is the Guadalupe mountain range, over time earning their trust. For a time I lived amongst them, learning their ways, understanding how they perceive the world around them. Both of our realities occur at the same time, suggesting that the orthanoids were able to avoid many of the mistakes humanity had made. The environment around them still flourished, a stark contrast to what's happening in our own timeline.
Not only was there an advanced society of dinosaurs in this version of our own world, but they were peaceful, reasonable beings. On top of it all, I finally knew where my uncle had been these past 2 decades. I looked up to notice that the 2 orthanoids escorting me stopped in their tracks. We were at a steep slope of jagged rocks, both of them looking up towards the peak. The first one extended its legs and lifted off the ground, leaping onto the rocks almost like a bird taking off. I watched them grip the rocks tightly, scaling the near vertical surface like it was nothing. My other companion looked at me, gesturing me to continue following them. He led me towards a walkable but treacherous ledge. Each step I took was carefully calculated. I mean, imagine coming all this way just to fall to your doom. It took a good 45 minutes, but upon arrival we stood at the foot of a wall of vegetation. Hanging down its face was a collection of vine-like plants. My feathered escort ran toward the wall, disappearing into the green. It was apparently a hidden passage of sorts. Without a second thought, I went after them, taking me into what looked like a cave, but there was a light around the corner. I scaled the semi-steep path, and when I got to the end, there it was. A whole village of them nestled on the side of the mountain, overlooking the entire valley. Dozens of orthanoids were living there. Their homes looked like hordes of branches and sticks weaved together, much like a bird's nest. My presence was soon made evident, as many of them now fixated their attention on me, a reaction that was somewhat warranted, for as far as I knew, they've only ever seen one other human who was almost certainly here. Realizing that fact, I was anxious to finally see him. The two individuals that led me here appeared before me, and again gestured for me to follow them. The three of us came upon the largest of the nest houses at the center of the village. From the doorway hung all sorts of woven ornaments. Once inside, there, sat atop what looked like a large nest, was an orthanoid with much darker grey plumage, their arms folded against their chest like wings. Atop their head was a crown of ornamental vegetation sewn together, and around their neck hung all sorts of vivid jewelry. Obviously, this individual was the leader of the village, or a chief of some sort. The two that had led me here approached the old-timer, squawking and chirping up a storm. With a guttural hiss, they were silenced by their elder, who then gestured to them, signaling the pair to leave. After they exited the hut, the old bird-like figure rose from their nest and slowly approached until they were right in front of me. What happened next, I never saw coming.
It seems you have found yourself in quite the predicament, haven't you?
I was completely speechless. In a surprising twist of events, the village chief spoke to me in perfect English. His voice was very similar to a raven or parrot, but much deeper and more reserved. How do you know my language? And more importantly, how can you speak it? The chief looked at me, knowing I'd be surprised.
Astonishing as it may seem, you are not the first otherworldly mammalian we've encountered. Our kind has a unique ability to imitate the sounds we hear.
I was confident I knew who he was referring to.
I apologize if my grandchildren caused you any trouble on the way here.
Not at all. In fact, they saved my life. Wanting to know more about this other human, I asked, "You mentioned somebody else like me. Who were they?"
Many seasons ago, another one of your kind came to our lands. While cautious at first, we realized they posed no threat. In accordance to our ways, we take the time to understand which is unknown to us. Fear is the path to ignorance. We took them in, taught them our ways, learned everything we could from them.
The chief then looked me directly in the eye.
What is your name, stranger?
My name is Henry, I told him. I've come here looking for Dr. Carl Wilkinson. The chief looked at me in shock. There was a look of sorrow in his eyes.
I had long anticipated your arrival, Henry. I had known for a time this day would come.
What do you mean? His head hung, looking as if tragedy had just occurred.
Come, my boy. There's something I must show you.
The chief led me outside. We walked through the village until we reached a cavern, into which we entered. Once inside, there was a whole row of mounds, the corridors illuminated by a set of torches. Each had a wooden staff protruding from their center. Mounted at the top of the poles were the skulls of assorted orthanoids. Clearly, this was a crypt.
These are the halls of our deceased,
explained the chief.
Once we pass on, we are laid to rest here.
The skulls, inferred to be from the individuals buried at each spot, were the most interesting part, no doubt a part of their culture. With respect, may I ask why it is that you display the skulls of your dead in this manner?
That is how we honor their memory. And so their spirits can return to this realm to commune with their kin.
The dead talk to you?
Not in the way you may think. To commune with the fallen, one must be attuned to their surroundings and learn to listen to the land.
I was never a religious guy, but I was amazed at how complex their culture was. 66 million years of evolution, and dinosaurs have not only continued to thrive, but have evolved advanced ways of life, much like humanity did, only without any of the horrific events that occurred in our own timeline, at least as far as I knew. We walked to the far end of the crypt. Atop the staff was a human skull.
Carl was an intelligent and benevolent soul, and he was a good friend.
The chief turned to face me.
I am terribly sorry.
I had no words. After all this time searching, the man I came for was gone. I dropped to my knees. A feeling of emptiness engulfed me. I had no idea why. I hardly knew Carl. We practically never saw each other. So why? Why did I feel this way? The chief put his scaly hand on my shoulder.
In the time he lived here, Carl had been planning for seasons, waiting for your arrival to share this place with you. Share what he learned with one of his own. Once accomplished, he was able to accompany you back to your realm.
Given what I'd heard from his recordings, all he wanted was for somebody to believe him this whole time. I had first merely dismissed him as a quiet, bizarre man who never made time for family. But after all these years, he wanted to come home. I got up and looked at my uncle's mounted skull, wishing I could talk to him. Then I turned to face the chief to ask a question. How did he die? The elderly birdman was quiet at first, but then spoke.
He was found at the hands of the scorched.
The scorched? Who did he mean exactly? He continued.
None know where they came from, but several seasons ago, a strange tribe entered our lands, much like us, but different. At first they were merely observers, but soon enough they attacked. They burned the land using their branches of fire, attacked our kind, leaving cinders and ash in their wake.
My brain clicked. The emblem on the tree from earlier. In the forest I saw a carving, one that looked like a flame. Was that their work? The chief unexpectedly recoiled.
They're here,
he said in a voice of concern.
It's no longer safe for you here. We need to return you to your realm.
But why? I asked.
The scorched have returned. If they find you, they will surely kill you. Or perhaps worse.
His description of these other beings sounded serious, but there was still a problem. I came here through the other side of the valley. Who knows how long it will take us to get there?
We have our ways, my boy. Worry not.
Ultimately, I complied, but not without facing my uncle for one last time. I looked at his skull and paid my final respects. In a way, I made peace with him. Almost as soon as I came, the chief and his grandchildren safely guided me back down to the foot of the mountain. When we did, I still had no idea how I was going to cover all that ground in such a short amount of time. The chief looked over to his progenies. And nodded. This signaled them to both let out a cackle. That echoed throughout the forest. For a minute, there was nothing. But soon enough, running our way were 3 large bipeds, A trio of horse-sized dinosaurs that were much like ostriches in appearance, only with long tails, stopped right in front of us before reaching down to nuzzle the two young orthanoids.
They will take you to the other side of the valley. None are their equal in speed.
It didn't take me long to notice that there were only 3 of them. Are you not coming with us? I asked the chief.
I'm afraid I must stay here. My responsibility is to our village and to keep our kind safe.
I understand, but what's going to happen? Will you be safe?
Placid as we are, self-defense is nothing strange to us. We shall lay down our lives to defend our lands and our kind.
The ostrich creatures knelt down, which prompted the chief's grandkids onto their backs. It was time to go. I carefully climbed onto the back of the third animal, positioning myself as one would with a horse. As it stood up, I could feel myself rushed into the air. The thing's back was quite sturdy. I looked down at the chief one last time. Thank you for everything.
May the ancestors guide you to safety,
he said in response. My fellow Mounties let out another call, sending our steeds into a sprint. I could feel the air rushing past my head. Trees, ferns, and rocks all zipped past me. It only took about 25 minutes to reach the edge of the forest. Before I knew it, I was back on the open plains. While we rode, I couldn't shake the thought of the aforementioned scorched, the ones who killed my uncle. The way they were described by the chief painted them as dangerous entities, ones that weaponized fire. But just who or what were they exactly? In time, we reached the center of the valley. Halfway there, but time was running out. I noticed the sun making its way down to the horizon. This put me on the timer, as the portal would close soon, trapping me here for a whole week. Suddenly, however, an object came flying out in front of us. What looked like a flaming spear struck the ground, lighting it on fire, the impact of which frightened our steeds and sent them running adjacent. Another landed in front of us, setting the ground ablaze, once more causing them to change direction. We were now at top speed toward the other end of the valley. It wasn't long before flaming spears were chucked at us from behind, just barely but fortunately missing. Off to the side, I could make out movement in the grass. Whoever was chasing us was also lightning quick. A dark figure then erupted from cover into the air. I only saw them for a brief moment, but got a good enough look to make out their appearance. They looked like giant crows or ravens, only with a longer tail, hook-shaped talons on each foot, and a head that looked like some unholy cross between a lizard and a vulture. Their bodies were adorned with a variety of jewelry and tribal piercings. Nearly there, just a little further. My mind focused only on the destination. Another one leapt out of the grass and chucked a spear from its mouth right in front of us, the impact of which spooked our mounts, causing me to fall off. Frightened, my only mode of transportation ran off. A growing flame started rising in front of me. I immediately jumped to my feet, but out from behind me, 2 more of them emerged. They slowly crept toward me, hissing and clicking with their talons, their bright yellow eyes making contact with mine. My heartbeat skyrocketed, something they could clearly pick up on. They enjoyed my fear. Before they could advance further on me, something small and reddish in color hit one of them, exploding into a cloud of red dust. My attackers began to shriek and choke in agonizing pain. One of the chief's grandkids rode past, throwing another, the timing of which allowed me to escape. The other young orthanoid rode up toward me, the ostrich creature kneeling down. I climbed on as fast as I could, and we took off. It couldn't run as fast as before, now that it was carrying 2 passengers, but it was just enough to cover large tracts of ground. As I looked behind us, I could see the prairie burning, the flames continuing to spread. I could only hope the chief's other progeny was okay. Following that ordeal, it didn't take long for us to arrive at our destination. We dismounted, our speedy ally proceeding to run off back into the grasslands. My feathered companion bobbed their head at me, gesturing that I follow. However, this wasn't exactly the way I came down. Instead, it was a small ravine. A shortcut, maybe? Nonetheless, I followed. I looked up once more, and the sun was nearly about to set. I knew I needed to get my ass moving. My guide led me through the ravine, safely navigating the bends and divots. Finally, there it was, exactly as I had left it. I turned to face my avian usher. I knew they didn't exactly know English, so I just decided to nod to them, to which they did the same in response. I slowly walked over to the portal, relieved to finally go home. Or so I thought. A shadowy figure kicked me, and I plummeted to the ground. It was another one of them, the scorched, the things that killed my uncle. This one was missing an eye. In fact, half of their face looked like it was singed off. Its snout possessed what looked like some sort of marking, reminiscent of a tribal tattoo. With an ominous stare, it readied itself to pounce. Its talons lifted off the earth, but was stopped mid-air by another figure ramming into it, the chief's progeny. They wrestled my assailant, and as they did, they gave me one last look and shrieked. I needed no translation. They were telling me to go now. The sun had set, and the portal was beginning to flicker. It was now or never. I barreled right through the portal. In the blink of an eye, it contracted. I was back in the desert, in my universe. The top of the bluff was lit by the rising sun. It's been roughly 8 months since all of this went down. Not a day has gone by where I haven't thought about my excursion. More importantly, the orthanoids. What was going to happen to them? The two who guided me through all those perils were the ones I worried about the most. If not for them, I wouldn't have made it back, or still be alive for that matter. Who knows what happened to them, though? It pains me to think about what horrible things the scorched would do to them. By now, however, the portals won't open again for another 20 years. Meaning all I can do is hope, to pray, that the orthanoids will be okay. But what if I didn't? What if there was a way to reopen the portals manually without having to wait another 2 decades? Ideas that crossed my mind not too long ago. My uncle spent years studying these gateways to other realities. What if there was hypothetically a way to open one? Sooner or later, I'll come back for his research, trying to better understand how all of it works. I have since vowed to figure it out, so that I may return.